let's go down to this interleave practice and let's learn about what the transform property does. So if I go back down here to interleaved and I say I want to do a transform property. So transform has three different functions that happen, and well, and they vary, right? There's skew or skew x, which can skew the x and y, or skew, there's a bunch of them. Let me show you a few of them. I'm going to show you the skew x. So there, see how we have skew, skew x, and skew y. I want to do the skew x, and I say, how much do you want to skew it? And I want to skew it 30 degrees, and you do degrees, D-E-G. So, and this just takes it and it transforms the element. Now I'm doing it to images. You can do it to other things. It doesn't just have to be an image. It can be a heading, it can be a paragraph, whatever. You can transform an element. I'm transforming an image here because it's very visible to see what happens. And there, notice what it did. It skewed it with the x direction. It took the regular x location and it skewed the top and the bottom x positions away from each other. And we did it by 30 degrees. We can do it by 10 degrees. Right? Not so much. We can do it by more degrees and skew it a whole bunch. Like a whole bunch. All right. So let's go back to 30. And there we get that. And that's what that transform skew does. Transform also has the option to rotate. Let's try that with this picture. So if we do the transform, and now that we're going to do rotate, and again it has lots of different options for rotating, but I'm going to just rotate the plain one, and I'm going to do it 35 degrees. And this one is, see how that it just rotates that element. I can use a negative number here too, and it rotates the other way. Okay, so transform takes an element and it transforms it some way. Okay, now let's combine these two. Let's combine the transition and the transform. So notice that the transform is happening, it's just the way the page is built. So when it first displays, when it last displays, there's no movement on it, right? But what about if we do it on hover? So let's go ahead and set the interrogation on hover. So I'm going to play with this image up here. And I'm going to say on hover, I want it to do something. All right, so to do that, I have to do the dot interrogation. Let me capture it so I don't misspell it. But I'm going to say when we hover over it. All right, when we hover over it, I want it to transform. Okay, so I'm putting the transform in the hover category, and that gives it a different timing. It doesn't happen when the page loads, but it only happens when you hover over it. So it's going to transform. And now I'm going to use the scale. And the scale transform properties, again, there's a variety of them. This changes the size. So I'm going to scale this, and I want it to change by 1.5. So I'm going to use a 1.5 scale. So let's go ahead and see what happens here. So the transform scale. So this is only going to happen when I hover, so no change here. But as soon as I hover, it gets bigger. See that? It's bigger. And so, and that's how transform works in a hover selector. Okay, so now let's go ahead and do the transition to make that be more smooth. So we know that with the transition, we say what property, when a property changes, how do you want it to change? And with the property that's going to change is the transform property. And we want to say, do this over 3 seconds. So whenever you change the transform property, take some time to do it. So here we refresh. Now when I hover, it changes size, but it changes over 3 seconds. How about that? There you go. Now notice what's happening. Because that's scaling it from where it is, it's no longer attached to the top or the bottom. So let's go ahead and not only change that, let's change the top property. And let's say, hey, we want this top to be more off of we want more distance off the top so we can see all of that. So I'm going to move that top off there 50 pixels and see what happens. So it's okay. Now, did you see it? It happened as soon as I hovered, it went off the top 50 pixels and then it filled it up. All right, so that worked. Let's go ahead and do say we want to come off the right as well so we don't lose that right side. And I've already done the math to figure out these exactly. So here we go, 75. Okay, so as soon as I hover, it comes off of the right 75 off of the top 50, and then it grows to fill that. Well, let's go ahead and make those transition as well. So up here, you can do more than one in a transition. Let's say we'll do the top is the property I want to specify, and I want you to spend 3 seconds whenever you change the top property. And let's do the right, and let's say that on the right, we also want to do 3 seconds. Whenever you transition the right property, do 3 seconds. So we specified 3 different properties to change the transform. And let's go see how that works. Now when I hover, they're going to transition. See how they all transitioned at the same speed and then transition back. So fun things you can do with all these new properties. We have the position property, the shadows property, the rounded borders property, and then these new properties transform and then transition to allow us to identify how we want to transition from one to the other. Fun properties to add to your CSS toolkit.